Good evening. Yay! Good evening, everyone. My name is Allison Weisinger, and I am the president of the Decatur Book Festival. I also do a little moonlighting as the library director for DeKalb County Public Library, just in my spare time. And I want to welcome you. I'm so thrilled to welcome you to the 2024 Decatur Book Festival. We took a break last year, as you may know, but it looks like it didn't hurt attendance. We had a couple of bumpy years with COVID, but we are now back. And we are, yes. We are very happy to be back this October. We have over 100 authors and moderators that you'll see tomorrow. We have our street festival back. We have the culinary stage back. We have a special area for kids to have fun. We also will have Library Alley, we'll have food and music and entertainment. So it's gonna be a great day tomorrow. If you haven't looked at decaturbookfestival.com, make sure you do it when you leave tonight so you can plan your day tomorrow. I want to take just a moment for us to maybe reflect and acknowledge the struggles that our region has had over the last week. The metro Atlanta area, we got lucky last week with Hurricane Helene, but many of our reading communities and literary communities in Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Tennessee did not get so lucky. So let's think of our friends out there. And we did have some cancellations related to the storm, so that's why you maybe see some of those authors not here today. Now it's time for some thank yous. There are a lot of people to thank. First off, we're gonna thank Joyce Carol Oates for coming all the way from New Jersey for our Keynote event. This is her second time at the Decatur Book Festival, so we're really glad that she came back. We want to thank our very good friends here at Decatur First Baptist Church for hosting our keynote and many events. They've been a great partner for the book festival for many, many years. We couldn't do this festival without a number of sponsors. These are the folks who give us the cash, the cold, hard cash that we need to make this festival happen. And we had some folks really, really step up this year, and we appreciate it so much. I want to thank DeKalb County government and the Joe Barry Carroll Family Foundation. They are our literary luminary sponsors, each giving $100,000 towards the festival. In addition, we have the City of Decatur, Visit Decatur, Downtown Development Authority, Emory University, the Lulu Ma Foundation, Rough Draft Atlanta, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Atlanta Writers Club, DeKalb County Public Library, the DeKalb Library Foundation, the Georgia Center for the Book, First Baptist Church of Decatur, Georgia Humanities, the Local Palette, the Task Force for Global Health, and Agnes Scott College. Let's give them all a round of applause. We also love and are grateful for our local booksellers. In alphabetical order, let's thank Brave and Kind Bookshop, Karis Books and More, Eagle Eye Bookshop, and Little Shop of Stories. Make sure that you buy the books that you hear about today and tomorrow. Buy multiple copies. They make great gifts. Holidays are coming up, so there you go. We also want to thank all of our individual donors. We have a number of individual donors. We want to thank you. And then this festival also doesn't just happen in a vacuum. There's a lot of people involved to make this happen. We have a really great board of directors. A number of them are here tonight sitting up front. Will you please stand so you can be acknowledged? Thank you. And then we have some staff. We have Leslie Wingate, our executive director, Denise Ozier, our programming director, Steve Salcedo, our street fair manager, Sarah Sanders and Emily Giglio from Sarah Sanders Creative, our marketing and communications team. We want to thank Joe Davich and Allie Stone Wright with the Georgia Center for the Book, Shelley Woodruff, Deborah Pyron, Mickey Goodson from the First Baptist Church of Decatur, and Ted Nelson and Wendy Bohannon for the culinary stage. And lastly, there will be hundreds of volunteers wearing the yellow t-shirts tomorrow on the square and here tonight. Please thank them for all the work that they do to make sure that this festival goes on smoothly. And now I'd like to welcome to the stage Leslie Wingate.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. I am so excited. I can't believe it's happening. We have talked about this festival for so long, and here we are. The festival is here. I am so grateful for that, but also so grateful to be in this position as executive director. I had a very brief retirement from Emory, 1 month. I retired from Emory in February after 20 years and then started this job a month later. Right place, right time. I was on the board at the time. I just want to I do have to spend a couple minutes thanking people because I feel very emotional about the people who have made this possible. Allison, thank you. And thank you to the board, all of our board members. We have a working board, folks, and I could not be doing this job without their support, their love, their encouragement, their faith in me. It's been amazing to work under this board. The staff team, Denise, she brought the authors in. She brought Joyce Carol Oates in. She has done such an amazing job. Steve has done an amazing job. You'll see the street festival tomorrow. And of course, Sarah Sanders is actually my daughter, Sarah Wingate Sanders, and she has done an amazing job with Emily on the marketing and communications. Would not have been able to do this without her, honestly. And the church team, you all, this church, I need to do a commercial. I could be like their testimonial for life. They are amazing. This church has bent over backwards to make this easy for us, and they just do so much. Speaking of patience and kindness and generosity, they never say no. They never say no, and they bend over backwards. I can't tell you how wonderful they've been. Shelley, Deborah, Mickey especially, and many others. Every single one of them, amazing. All right, so there's my thanks. There's much more, but we're short on time. We need to let them speak. So we're going to expect a fascinating conversation tonight between Joyce Carol Oates and Joe Barry Carroll. In the interest of time, there will be no Q&A tonight. Apologies, but we don't have the time. Following the conversation, Ms. Oates will sign books, and I'll come back later with more details on that. And so now it's my true honor to introduce our speakers. I am going to keep it short. Joyce Carol Oates really needs no introduction, as you know. She's the author and editor of many, many, many works of fiction, poetry, and nonfiction. She's a recipient of the National Book Award, PEN America's Lifetime Achievement Award, the National Humanities Medal, and a World Fantasy Award for short fiction. She lives in Princeton, New Jersey. We are deeply grateful and honored to have this iconic woman and author on our stage this evening. We are so lucky. Joe Barry Carroll actually asked us not to say anything about him, really. So I'm not allowed to, but I'm just going to say, I have to say just a couple of things. I think you all know him. He's an MBA all-star. He's founder of the Carroll Group Wealth Advisory Firm, Joe Barry Carroll Publishing. He's an author in his own right. He's an artist. But to us at the Decatur Book Festival, he's a hero. And he really is, because his generous sponsorship is what brought the festival back to the community. We would not be here tonight if it weren't for his family foundation. And last comment about Joe, the most important one, I think, is he's married to our dear board member, artist, author, festival moderator, Tara Coit. Thank you, Tara. I turn it over to you now. Yes.
Good evening. You okay? You good? All right. So, how have you been?
I'm happy to be here. As we were saying in the green room, just when the airplane, is on the ground, we're very grateful. I scarcely even know where I am. It's just that we're on the ground.
You are, and safely. Yeah, but you're going to turn around and go back home. No fried food or nothing before you go?
Well, maybe.
Yeah. Okay, I want to start out with this. I'm going to read a couple things. And this is from Letters to a Biographer. And we have two of them here, which we'll talk about a little bit more in the second block. But I want to start here. If I were not myself and faced with the prospect of writing about me, I would see the challenge as simply how to make a writer's life interesting in any narrative, dramatic sense. The writer's life, this writer's life certainly is so inward, secretive, and obsessive, the surface is largely irrelevant. Perhaps I worry about it. Perhaps I worry about you, with whom I partly identify, toiling to make something interesting that is not. Can you really convince them that you're not that interesting?
Well, it's a dilemma to try to talk about oneself. I think the reason that I'm really not that interested in myself is the reason I'm a novelist. And when I write poetry, I tend to write about like narrative poetry about other people. So I'm just a little more interested in, stories of other people.
Are these stories kind of a love letter to the people who support you and appreciate you? Is this like your love language?
Oh, I don't know. I've never thought about that before.
Now, you got to put modesty to the side. I mean, these people, they're over that. They know you, so go ahead.
Well, I don't think we understand really the absolute roots of creativity. I mean, young children are very creative. Sometimes before they even have language, they're, drawing or coloring in coloring books, which I did. So that impulse to create something that wasn't there before, that's sort of your expression, that seems very instinctive. So
you're just bringing everybody else along with you?
But when you talk about it, trying to analyze it in an intellectual way, I think it's difficult. Mm-hmm. It's like, why is there music in the world? Why do we sing and why do we have music? It's sort of hard to explain what that is, but we all instinctively, we sing from time to time and we dance and so forth. So I don't necessarily feel that if I can articulate a motive, that it's actually that absolute. It's sort of like groping for an explanation for something that you would do instinctively.
Well, with such a diverse and expansive career, I mean, it's like we really should be interviewing you by committee. Like, give everybody an assignment of what to cover. But since it's just us and 500 of our closest friends, we'll move on. Let's dive in. Part of your fame is your love of animals. Who is currently living with you at 9 Honey? She refers to her home as 9 Honeybrook, as you all probably know. I'm telling you what you already know. Who's there? What do you have pets currently?
Well, they're always on Twitter. So if there are any Twitter people here, yes, I have one cat named Zanchi. I didn't realize that we were going to be talking about something so important. I would have brought pictures of these cats. One is Zanchi, a Maine Coon, long-haired tuxedo cat, very vain with long whiskers. And the other is more of a modest, smoked calico short hair. I shouldn't call it short hair, that sounds sort of diminished. So I live with those two kitties. But I do write about animals, and I'm kind of interested in inter-species bond between animals and people. That's a theme I want to write more about.
Are dog people different than cat people?
Well,
Is there a heckler out there?
Son a dog. No, I like dogs a lot. I just don't have a tradition, but I grew up on a farm where there were always barn cats, and so we lived with cats. So I kind of eased into the cat world. Whereas dogs, I would love to have an alternative life where I had a nice dog. So when I came home, my friend and colleague, Patricia Smith, the poet, I don't know if you know Patricia, but she said...
Oh, yeah, we talk all the time. Go ahead.
Patricia said that when she comes home, she wants to be welcomed. She wants a Burmese dog to leap at her and kind of hold her like a huge bear. She said, I want to know when I come home that I'm welcome. Whereas with a cat, the cat's kind of, oh, you're back.
I love this that you, let me ask, are we getting good sound in the back? We got to start all over? They're asking you to hold it a certain way.
Is it me or him?
What do you want?
Hello?
You could actually speak louder?
Oh.
I'd speak louder. I'm speaking very loudly.
To her, that's aggressive.
I'm shrieking.
Okay, so I really dig this. You're reflecting again to your letters to Greg. Where's Greg?
Oh, Greg is embarrassed. We don't want
Where's
him to be
Greg?
embarrassed.
Greg? Hey,
No,
Greg.
don't.
No, don't. Too late. I'm
Well,
bigger than he is.
I think he's embarrassed. I don't want to be embarrassed.
These letters, and we'll talk a little bit more about it, are letters from Miss Oates to Greg Johnson, who's sitting over here for...
He's outed.
He's what?
You've outed him.
I have. People know who he is. He's a big shot here in Atlanta. He didn't tell you?
I didn't know that. Well,
Yeah.
that's news.
He's writing, the extraordinary thing about certain animals is that they do seem to forge a bond with us. And that bond, the very metaphysics of it, exclamation, is in time the only thing that holds them in life. In a state of nature, they would die unnoticed with non-caring or non-affluent owners that they would die. But with us, they're able to live for a while at least. The only people who dismiss animal lovers as sentimental are people who haven't really known animals intimately and haven't discovered that animals' personalities are as individual as ours. You still agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I'm worried people can't hear me.
They can. I think we will continue to try, and maybe they'll can fix it on the way.
Try this one.
Is that better? Let's see. Mic check.
Is this better? No.
Let's try an angle here. Is it, if you talk into it? No?
Is this better?
All
Okay.
right. Remember that right there.
Yes.
You may have carpal tunnel before you leave, but remember that. And I bring up
you.
the animals because I discovered myself. I just had an 11-year love affair with my mostly lab from the rescue shelter. And I was I knew I was going to learn something, but I had no idea that I wouldn't even refer to her as a pet, because I think I ended up being a pet. Because I started out all excited, you know, I'm going to have rules and everything, and slowly I find myself in the kitchen cooking special meals for her and fixing a rash, something to clear her rash up and stuff. So I get it. And I'm wondering, like you talk about this, he's telling you something. Go ahead. It's just in time for the rooster. I want to talk about this rooster, one of your earlier pets. With the rooster, you said you didn't understand why the rooster would treat you the way you all know that she's from a small town in New York kind of thing, and she was responsible for feeding the chickens. But there was a rooster, which she's very fond of, but she didn't understand why you could feed a rooster as on time the way she did, and the rooster ends up pecking her afterwards. He attacked her. Did you ever work your way through that? Was that a therapy thing?
Well, this is my third microphone in like 3 minutes. I'm feeling that I'm not sure. It's like walking around. Oh, no, they don't like this microphone.
I'm sorry. Let's try that for a second.
And we're saying some really important stuff up here. This is troubling. Do you have one of these for her? You can hear me though, right? They're missing all the good. She's saying the good stuff.
Wonderful for a microphone.
I'm sorry?
Your voice really carries well.
Is that right? Oh, I must be needy. I need attention for something. I don't know. And we're getting to the book, but...
You asked me about the rooster. We got
Yes.
sidetracked.
They can hear you.
They're rooster
Is
lovers.
that what you're saying? It's better? Let's do this. Let's light this candle.
There are rooster fans out there. I don't want
She's
to
got it.
disappoint.
Thank you. You want
What?
to hang out? What's up? No, you don't have a chair.
So,
The rooster.
Okay, well,
Was it a particular rooster, or was this like a series of roosters?
there's just one rooster in my whole life.
Okay.
We're trying to deal with that one rooster. No, when I was a little girl, I was in charge of feeding chickens. And that gave me a false sense of importance, because if you're scattering seed, a whole lot of chickens come running excitedly. And you sort of think, well, maybe I'm popular or there's something special about me. But actually, it's the chicken feed. So, but the hens are very appreciative, if a bit indifferent to the whole thing. But the rooster stood out because, first of all, he was so beautiful with his feathers, and he was so vain. Of course, most males are not nearly so vain as the rooster. But so he
Okay, I was raised with 6 sisters. I felt that. You gave that to me. That did not escape me.
So the rooster would come running over very quickly, and he would eat the seed very appreciatively. Then, seeing me, he would walk over and peck my knee and draw blood. And I used to wonder, like, why did the rooster do that? But my grandmother, who was a Hungarian immigrant who had lived and seen a lot of things, she said, that is just the way roosters are. And that's sort of folk wisdom. In other words, don't try to look for a motive, a psychology, or a morality. It's the way roosters are. And she sort of looked at me like, don't you know that? So I sort of absorbed that folk wisdom, which is just common sense.
And you said that's how men are. They peck you.
Well, not all males are so vain as the rooster. See, the other side of being a rooster, the other side, which the rooster doesn't know, but people who are from farms know, that the male baby chicks are all killed. They're mashed, or some horrible things are done to them, like one rooster is allowed, and all the other males are gone. So it's this world of female hens who are busy laying eggs and doing all sorts of female things. And then there's this one rooster who's around to impregnate the hens for the next batch of baby chicks, from which only one male is going to be selected. So it's sort of an interesting phenomenon that the male is so vain, and it's wonderful that the roosters are beautiful and vain, but they don't understand that they're so singular and that most of their kind is just murdered.
Oh, how delightful.
Those are kind of
I had a rooster too, but as an adult, I liked it, but I didn't understand. I thought that they just do a cock-a-doodle-doo once in the morning, but they do it throughout the morning. So I was disturbed. He was waking me up. I'm like, that looks like supper to me. But I didn't butcher it or anything.
You were sleeping
But
too
a
late.
predator got it, so I didn't replace it. So that's what happened. I didn't.
What kind of predator? A coyote?
I don't know. I live kind of in the woods, and all kind of things. You get up
Fox.
and things are dead, and you don't know everything.
Fox, raccoon.
How large of a farm were you on?
Well, it wasn't a very large farm, but it was in the kind of wilds of upstate New York. It was really 7 miles from the nearest city.
Oh.
So there are all kinds of creatures there. But now I live about 4 miles outside Princeton. We have coyotes, we have foxes, we have possums, and we have raccoons and wild turkeys.
Okay, I'm gonna shift gears. Raymond Smith. Let's celebrate Raymond. What can you tell us? Share us one of your fond memories.
Well, my late husband, Ray Smith, was really a wonderful editor and a publisher. He started a small magazine. I was like the co-editor. He did all the work. I just read stories and accepted and worked a little bit with writers. But Ray did all the work of the publishing and, copy editing and getting the paper and talking to the printers and all that. So we had that for many years, many decades.
How's that working side by side like that for all that time?
Oh, that was wonderful.
It's not many years.
Yeah.
How many years was it?
Well, it started in...
I mean, you say it as though you guys just did it over the summer.
No,
but it's
it was a long time.
Yeah.
It would have been beginning in Windsor, Canada, like please don't faint because this is such a long time ago.
They're jealous of you.
Like
Don't worry about them.
1970 or so, through the decades, and he passed away in 2008, so it was all that time. Yeah, it was wonderful to work with a partner, with a spouse, and selecting works of art particularly. We always had art on the cover of the magazine. It was Ontario Review, and then we had an artist featured. So we would go around to exhibits in locals, like small galleries around in small towns, and then we got acquainted with lots of people. So it was a wonderful experience, and it ended kind of abruptly, but it was beautiful while it lasted.
You mentioned the art. You talked about Egon Schiele. How do you pronounce it? Schiele. Who else do you like?
Oh, well, I just told you that I've tweeted some of your paintings, which are very beautiful. And
You're adorable.
well, I noticed you do interesting things with light and color, and I like the color field artists of the 1960s, like Rothko and Helen Frankenthaler and the young Philip Guston. I mean, they're sort of working with beautiful, non-figurative, abstract art, which is sort of hard to do when you don't have any figure that you're actually replicating and you're sort of doing this abstract art. But I like all art. I like Klimt. Winslow Homer is one of my favorite artists.
Is there bad art?
Well, I don't know if there's bad art. It's all subjective.
All of it?
Well, things are...
I agree. So I'm just trying to get you to say something that I agree
things
to.
in life tend to be relativistic because something that somebody loves a lot, somebody else might not like, and vice versa. So I think it's hard to be absolutist about art because art is sometimes offensive to people, like Picasso's Guernica, which shows suffering and sort of exaggerated features. It's a very profound, startling work of art, but somebody might say, well, I don't want to look at death. I want beauty, but not death.
Do you find any instruction with the great artists as you're doing your own compositions? Because I know at the end you seem to be, there's a lot of conversation about the dust cover, the dust jacket. Who you're gonna put on there for the art, the creative, that part of it. It seems like it's the final part. It's equal to what you're doing inside the cover.
Well, I think so. I think because a book is an artifact. It's not like something that's online, which is just sort of like a screen, but like an old-fashioned book, particularly in centuries ago, a book was very expensive. Books were beautiful. They had gold or gilt, So the book was an artifact. It was an aesthetic object. And I sort of identify with that. Though I do read and I write online, but my deeper love is with the book as an artifact. So books have covers and the images are chosen pretty carefully. Like for Brocart Blues, there's an image of a car from the 1970s, I guess, with its fins, it's kind of American, huge cars of a kind that we don't have today with these
Big
salmon-colored and kind of two-tone cars that were very fancy. They called them gas guzzlers, but today they're SUVs. And so it's kind of the same thing.
A whopping 12 miles to the gallon.
But the colors now today are much more neutral. It's more of a subdued time. I'm not sure why that's so. If you were in a parking lot, most the colors of most of the vehicles would be like neutral or dark, metallic dark, or maybe a white car. But you don't see all these fantastic colors of years ago.
Are you still running?
Well, I try to run. I walk and run every day.
Every day?
Oh, I try to, yeah. But that's the easy part. Life is hard, but running is fun.
I try to run, but it doesn't even qualify for running anymore. I mean, I used to train as an athlete, but now I'm just like moving. I just call it moving. It's motion. Excuse me. You mentioned that you get a lot of ideas and you do a lot of development when you're running. Are you able to use it when you get back? Because the things I think of when I run, I come back and none of it works really.
Oh, well, I'm very dependent on being able to move around. I don't think that one can sit in front of a computer and just be typing, and it still is like a sense of paralysis and intimidation to see your words like coming out on the screen. But if you're running and walking all by yourself, you're sort of daydreaming and you get in this state of meditation, and it doesn't seem at all inhibiting. It's more like something is open. It's sort of like a house with a roof that's open. So I tell my students not to sit at the computer and try to write because that's going to be paralyzing to them, but to go out, walk around, think, and daydream, then come back and maybe take notes in your own handwriting, and then when you feel it's ready, then you go to the laptop, but you know when it's ready.
Do you have an example of an idea you worked through recently that you really were having I mean, is this like you're having challenges and you say, okay, I'll take a run and I'll figure it out, or is it just part of the day for you?
Well, that's happened so many times when I'm really stuck and I'm sort of tired and this sort of weariness comes over you. Then I go out into nature, and I live in a country area, so I run along a country road, and I go up a hill, which I put on Twitter a lot, it's Bayberry Hill. So many ideas are waiting up there. It's like a mystical place where
where the ideas grow?
Where the ideas are there, but I can't have anybody with me because then people chatter. You know, that chattering and interruptions are the death of creativity.
How do you really feel about that? Do men write differently than women?
Oh, no, I don't think so. Not at all.
Are you not able?
No.
Some people feel that they look at things and it has a very strong male influence or feminine influence, whatever. You say no?
Well,
I guess you just said no, and I'm asking you to say no again. But
no,
yeah.
well, the content might determine it. You know, if Hemingway were writing about making a casserole and ironing, we would say, well, maybe that's like a woman, you know. But if Hemingway's writing about fishing and hunting, then we say, well, this seems like a man. But Joan Didion writes very much like Hemingway. She's learned a lot from Hemingway. There are a number of writers, particularly who came of age like in the 1970s, 1980s, all very influenced by Hemingway very well. Ray Carver's another one. But if you were reading Joan Didion, like quintessential Joan Didion, you probably wouldn't be able to say this is definitely a woman. If you're reading Virginia Woolf, she did have a style that's sort of emotional, shimmering waves of impressionistic thought, like not so much punctuation and short sentences, but rather like something like a waves of thought. Somebody might say, well, that seems like a woman's writing because of that technique. But James Joyce wrote that way too, especially the ending of Ulysses is just all one long wave of beautiful writing as thoughts rush through a woman's mind. So no, I don't think the style itself, I think it's more the subject matter that makes us think it's gender determined.
But I mean, isn't that the quest, the chore for a writer is to be persuasive, whatever the position is?
Yes.
They just,
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, D.H. Lawrence writes very well about women.
Thank you for agreeing with me.
Well, it has been a question, like some people say women have their own style and their own language. There's a whole movement that thinks that. But I don't personally think that because of all the reading I've done, I wouldn't honestly be able to say that a woman did or didn't. When I met Norman Mailer years ago, he said that I wrote like a man. And the audience laughed uproariously because it seemed like it was vain on his part. He didn't.
They didn't think this was funny. They resent Norman for that.
Well, they didn't. Well,
They're like, how dare he talk to her like that?
Well, he thought that the way he wrote a man wrote was like the best kind of writing. So he meant to be complimentary. Because I wrote a book on I wrote on boxing.
I got it. It's in
and
my
then
notes.
he wrote a short book on boxing called The Fight, which is about Muhammad Ali. I wrote a lot about Mike Tyson, so I think he was sort of approaching the subject rather than the actual, style.
How do you judge your own work? Because you have a history as an editor and thought leader or whatever. How do you, if you're looking at your work, are you able to look at your work and put that same light on it that you do other people's work?
Well, this is the advice I give to my students and my writing friends. When you're finished a draft and you have the ending, it's good to put it away for a little while, maybe just a week or so, then take it out and read it like a reader. In other words, not the writer. You're not taking notes and making annotations. You're reading it in real time like a reader. And then you will see whether the pacing is right. You'll see if it's too slow. If you're going to nitpick as you go along reading, then you'll never have that overview. It's like you need an overview of your own writing. That will be very helpful.
Are you hard on yourself?
I don't know how to answer that. I try to fully realize the text. So, you're writing a memoir, say it's about your mother or your grandmother, you want it to be beautiful and respectful of the subject. So you honor the subject by fully realizing it. You wouldn't say I'm being hard on myself. You're trying to get the richest material down there on the page. In other words, it's not so much the ego that you're hard on yourself, it's your respect for the text. And it's so funny because all my letters I just typed out. And so I didn't really remember the letters. And Greg Johnson, who actually is in this room, but we're not going to embarrass him, it was his idea.
Greg, do you mind standing up? I want them to meet you. Please.
No,
He's right here.
No,
and he really did a great job. You're not going to do it, are you?
He does it.
There he is, right there. Turn around and let him see you. Everybody likes credit for doing good work.
Well, I didn't want to embarrass him, but...
He's not embarrassed. He's pretending. He would have been offended. He wouldn't even talk to you in the car going home.
Okay.
All right.
But Greg had the idea to create the book. And so he said, well, I will go through the many letters, that maybe 1,000 letters I wrote to him over a period of decades. I won't say how many decades because I don't want to embarrass either one of us. It was not a short period of time. And so he selected these letters, and I was pretty astonished at reading them. It took me a while to make myself read them. It was very hard to read. It's stunning to look back on your own self like 30, 40 years ago. I mean, there's almost nothing to say. You are so stunned by what was going on in your life. And of course, in my experience, people who are not alive anymore. I'm writing about my parents and like funny things my father said, and cats that have died, and other people passed away. And I'm kind of reading about them in the real time when they were alive. And that's pretty sobering, So I was kind of
Was it a revelation? Did you find yourself finding out something that you didn't know about yourself?
It was a very emotional experience. I don't really know what to say. Well, one of the things that struck me was that I had so much energy. I was writing all the time and I was teaching. I was teaching 4 courses at Detroit for a while. 4 courses, 2 of them composition. I was really working hard. Nonetheless, I have time and energy to write a long letter to Greg. And I'm thinking these were on a typewriter, not electric typewriter, a real typewriter, like
Search and pitch.
so far back in time, people don't even know that they existed. I mean, before cell phones, before video games, before computers, there was like the electric typewriter. Before that was the manual typewriter. I must have just been typing away. And yet I remember I had plenty of time to do other things like bicycling and just doing lots of things. So that was kind of stunning that I had that energy. And then, as I said, lots of people in the letters I'm writing about are no longer with us. And that's always stunning,
Charles Gross.
And Charlie Gross was my second husband. Ray passed away in 2008. I met Charlie, was a neuroscientist at Princeton, and we were introduced by a mutual friend. So
You got set up? It was a date? I mean, like a blind date? They're like,
no,
how does that work?
It was more like he was introduced like at a party, that sort of thing. But Charlie had been divorced for 10 years and had been living alone for 10 years. He was really ready to get married again. And then I was in this aftermath of a great shock because I lost my husband. So I think we're two really lonely people finding each other. And we developed immediately an interest.
You kind of did a thing with that. That was kind of romantic, huh? Finding each other.
Well, it's what it was. And we did a lot of walking and not so much running, but walking. We did a lot of hiking. He liked to hike. Mm-hmm. So that was like the thing that we started doing that we both liked to do. And then I read his memoir. He was, as I said, a distinguished neuroscientist. He had been a pioneer in the area of vision and pattern recognition in this part of the brain that picks up on optical things. So I read his memoir. I got very interested in science. So there's a whole long part of my life now. I know much more about research science because of Charlie and his friends and the experiments that they did and the books he was reading. His library has the original publications of Darwin. I mean, the books are old books like his History of Science and History of Neuroscience. So his study is still there. I mean, I could go in there and look at these fantastic books. So I started writing a lot of things that were in the wake of that marriage, like about neuroscience. And we're all interested in the human brain. And I got to sort of become familiar with some of the classic experiments. My whole novel, A Butcher.
And you went to a lot of conferences as well.
Yeah. And science is hard. There people think that science can be summed up and reduced to little tidbits of knowledge. Real research science is extremely hard.
Did it inform your writing?
Yes, quite a bit. Yeah. I have a whole sequence of novels and stories and even some poems about the history of science. My novel, Butcher, which is my most recent novel, is very much in the wake of that interest in scientific and medical malpractice, misconduct as it's called, especially as women were used as sort of unwilling experimental subjects for male researchers and physicians.
That's tragic. What was Greg's charm? Sorry, I mean, this gentleman over here's charm.
His charm?
I mean, because you've gotten all this correspondence from people, I'm sure, at the time that he wrote you, because it was through correspondence, right? What was it about his letter that got your attention that you guys took on this? It's more than just your biographer. You guys are friends, and and probably confidants, because I'm sure there's some things that you did not put in here, judging from the intimacy of some of these letters.
Well, that is an interesting.
What was the thing? What was the thing that captured you about it?
That is an interesting question because I talk about that in my introduction, and I said how strange it was. So much of my life is really weird and inexplicable. Yeah. Many thanks to Greg Johnson for saving the letters, and many more not included. Inadvertently, unwittingly, through the years, Greg and I seem to have composed a kind of double portrait that, at the outset of 1975, neither of us could possibly have imagined. Nor could I have imagined that Greg would be my primary correspondent through most of my adult life. I mean, these things just happen. Who can explain it? How ideal to have a friend who is a prompt, warmly engaging, and always interesting correspondent. Not unlike those legendary letter writers of old, when letter writing was an integral part of our emotional lives. Because in the past...
Did you really just go straight to the page on that?
Well,
you went right to
this
it.
is the
How does that-
introduction. I mean, it's in the front. Well, no, I had to write the introduction, but it was quite an
So
emotional.
what part of that don't I understand, right?
It was quite an emotional experience.
Yes.
Like someday in your life, when you're older, somebody might come along with a whole cache of letters, like you wrote, 500 letters, like to your mother, your grandmother, your siblings, and then you have to look at those letters, and the person that you are now is really a stranger to that person, and then you have to try to mediate and write an introduction to it. It was very challenging to me. I think I probably explained to Greg that it was hard for me to do. And maybe it was hard for him to do also, but it was particularly hard. I mean, life is actually not that easy. It's sort of fun and laughing, in a social situation. But when you are all alone and you're remembering when you had a lot of people around you, and then you have these letters, it's sort of like a stark existential experience.
But I'm guessing also that it allows people who follow you, people who enjoy your writing and your work, to see this other part of you, because you're speaking in a very transparent and free way.
Yeah.
And you can't, otherwise, like if you're doing that during the time you're writing a novel or a short story, you're getting in the way if you're inserting yourself. But here, the objective of it is to insert yourself, and it's just done so beautifully.
Well, it was so interesting to read, and I've remembered things that I had totally forgotten. Well, life is just strange, It's sort of like you're looking down, you're at the bottom of a mountain, you skied all the way down this steep hill with all these things, and you avoided the trees and the boulders, and you somehow did it, but you think, I could never do that again, How do you feel about your life? You've had an unusual life. If you had to go back to when you were like 18 years old, would you have thought that you could do what you're going to do?
I don't recognize myself today.
Because it seems so daunting.
Yeah.
Like, oh my goodness, I don't think I could do that again.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I just don't, I would not have imagined, like just us being here right here. I'd be trying to figure out, how did you get in that chair with Miss Oates?
It is amazing, I know.
Yeah, it is.
And I think coming from humble beginnings, all the more mysterious. What you were one of, was it 11 children, 13 children?
13.
13, I mean, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. What can you say? It's like
I'm so flattered I'm on your radar.
It's like the mystery of life. It's like the mystery of life that there are, 30,000 people who have the same environment, background, went to the same school, had the same food, and yet only one of them is you. Or one of a million. That seems just confounding.
Yeah. To even get here.
Yeah. Well,
through the birth process.
We have one thing in common, that we like team sports. And I assume that when you were in high school, you were playing all sorts of sports. Because that experience of being on a team when you're a young person and working with other people, like the ball, passing the ball and doing this, and kind of intuiting what people are going to do. If you don't get that experience, I think, by high school, women will never get it. Women don't really have team sports the way men do. I mean, a man can still be playing touch football when he's like 40 or 50 years old. Well, women don't really have that. Women can play maybe tennis or something like that, but you sort of have to be in a school situation, I think.
I think it's fortunate that we're making progress, though, because I do think there are a lot of values that come out of sports. It's not quite as clear as we think it is in terms of it changing the world necessarily, like the Olympics or something, but I do think you learn a lot about order, about, like there's no debate who the best player on the team is. And that's just part of leadership, is that you follow them. Unless you want to, if you want to win. And you're bringing up something here. I want to get to this because I know the literary police are going to come get us in a little bit. Sports, boxing, Mike Tyson. I was so impressed. It wasn't necessarily, you have this long article and this book about boxing. How did you gather the funk of a gym? I mean, you understand stuff about sports that's just incredible. That you're in this arena, first of all, boxing is confusing to me. They call it the boxing ring, but it's a square, and it's too small because I was playing basketball, and the ring was over there. It was a gym, and I stood up, and I'm like, hell, you can't, you either got to run or fight or get knocked out.
How'd you like to
But
be
there's no room to even run in there, so you're going to get knocked out or you got to fight. I don't get it. How did you come to that?
Well, how would you like to be in that ring with Muhammad Ali? Because you couldn't run. I mean, he could catch you, you know. What you're saying is because that's a certain kind of really intense one-on-one sport that's almost the quintessential, you know, fighting to the death. Whereas the team sports like basketball are much more benign, where you have a team, you know, and it's not like one-on-one. It's not that intense. If one person starts to limp, then somebody else comes forward. Like if your best player hurts himself, then somebody else comes along.
But how did you come to understand the way you speak about boxing and sports, really? Because it's a whole culture that, unless you're really in it, you really can't understand it with that level of intimacy. You mentioned in some place in these notes that you've jumbled up by now. You're jumping all over my notes. You know that, right? You're talking about these positioning yourself, that you start with the landscape and then you grow the story out of that, as opposed to starting with a particular person. So do you have that level of empathy that you could identify with Mike Tyson?
Oh, I think so. But my interest in boxing was generated by my father, because when I was a little girl, about 10 or 11, 12, I was taken to Golden Gloves fights in Buffalo. So it was almost an exclusively male situation. There were very few women or girls there. So in those days, they all smoked. Do you remember those days where you go into a sports arena, people are smoking? It seems unbelievable now. So I was introduced to a world which was antithetical to
Or try one of your teammates smoking during halftime.
Well, I was introduced to a world that was antithetical to my mother and grandmother's world. Like that was the domestic world. And I loved my mother and grandmother very much. But with my father, we drove some distance. We went in a completely different world in the whole arena of masculine activity and how fierce and how, I think, fearless and courageous the young boxers were. I mean, it's tremendously scary to be getting in that ring in front of an audience.
I wouldn't do it. Wouldn't do it. I can't. I'm like Mike. I think Mike Tyson got in trouble when he as he progressed, he got older, and somebody punched him in the face. Because he wasn't getting punched until then. Once he got hit, he's like, ouch, that hurts.
Well,
don't you agree?
That's a little simple.
But I'm a simple guy.
No.
Don't encourage her. They're encouraging you.
No, if we could talk.
I'm not sure.
We could talk about Mike Tyson. We could talk about Mike Tyson for a long time.
Well,
But you don't
we're
wanna
not. I'm still stuck on simple. Here we go.
No, Tyson is a complicated person. He's very complex. He had a career, and there are different stages in the career and different developments in his own life, his personal, emotional life. And I would never try to sum up a person, like a complicated person. There are things to be said about Mike. He's no angel. You don't get to be heavyweight champion of the world by being a nice guy, but there are other sides of him that are very complex. Wonderful sense of humor, very playful, very intelligent.
But aren't we all complicated, though? Because, like in this book, the Brocard Blues, John Reddy, he's this guy that comes to town as a 12-year-old driving a Cadillac on phone books. And he captures everybody's imagination. And I think we're all complicated, and sometimes people are they have these leaps of imagination.
Yes.
I mean, he could have been like developmentally challenged, but they're giving him all of this kind of independence, fervor, and this type of thing.
Well, he's very clever, but he's sort of cunning and he's desperate because he's coming from a very lower class background to an affluent world. So he's got to make his way in a different community, but he's a basketball player. Like, he's a star basketball player. I got to get the basketball in.
Okay. you should. Go ahead.
Yep. He's the star basketball
He led the
player.
team in scoring that year. I mean, he broke the record.
Well, yeah.
But we are talking about a fictional character, though, are we not? We won't find him in high school,
no, but
New York high school history, will we?
well, the whole novel was generated by that keen feeling of nostalgia that we feel for our adolescent years. Like you have the really best friend in high school, and the feeling that you had was so special. And I wanted to write about those feelings that we have as adolescents, that we sort of lose them. But when high school classmates get together, they sometimes fall back into those relationships. And it's like time had hardly passed at all.
But do you intend to make it kind of a leap of imagination, though? Because a lot of the places, they're filling in the blanks. It's almost like everything many things that they attribute to him, there's no evidence of it. They just say that he's this or he's that based on something, that he walked down the street. They found him on a stream one day bleeding, and they figured he wrestled with an alligator or something, and he may have just stumbled and bumped his head.
Well, they mythologize. I think we all need to mythologize.
We need to?
Human beings mythologize all the time.
I know, but you say we need to. I'm just trying to get clarification.
We seem to need to. If you're immune and you don't have any heroes or models or somebody you look up to, that would be kind of sad, to be kind of bankrupt. So these young people, they're kind of idolizing him. He's the best basketball player. He's not like them because he's from a really lower class background. He's more physical and more rough.
Okay.
It's like the romance that affluent people have with like the Elvis Presley type. He sort of looks like Elvis Presley.
Okay, I want to go to some real stars. Not that Elvis is not, but in the letters, you're telling Greg that you were talking about having lunch with Toni Morrison and Adolphe Fugard. What is that like? I mean, do you guys have a little secret club? I mean, these are like, I'm just trying to imagine the talent at that table, and what do y'all talk about? What's going on? Is that like a club? You got a secret handshake, or do you go online and get that? How does that work?
Well, I don't know if Toni Morrison ever came to Decatur, but Toni Morrison was one of the very funniest persons I ever met in my life. She was so witty and warm and just had such a sense of humor. She had a wonderful laugh. She did not take herself over seriously. I think the world definitely put her on a pedestal. and maybe that made her more self-conscious. But when I knew Toni originally, she came to Princeton, she was my colleague and a friend, and absolutely warm and funny and unpretentious, and she just was a great colleague.
Are you peers? Like when you're traveling in that type of environment, do you feel a sense of that you don't have to explain things to them, or that you have is it a safe place for on that level? Because putting modesty aside, that's pretty heady. That's pretty heavy to me. I read that a few times. Really? They're having dinner? And all these people you talk about, Vanderbilts, Scorsese, Updike, these are your friends. And you're not name dropping. You were just saying in the course of explaining to him what you did and who you were with. It was just like in passing.
But John Updike had a background very much like my own. He came from a small rural area, and he was very smart and sort of intellectual in high school, but not so popular. John and I really identified. John Updike would say, the world looks upon me, and not realizing that I'm something that I made out of the scraps and tatters of my childhood. In other words, he come from a really rough, poor background. His father was a high school teacher and made probably made not even $2,000 a year. This is a long time ago. And so John kind of constructed this persona that became a really great writer. Same with Toni Morrison. Toni was once, long time ago, she had been a cleaning woman. And I come from a background, very, very modest kind of background.
So you guys do have a club?
No, if you're...
But I'm saying, you're talking about where you were. The background, but to reach this level of recognition and distinction, if we're to put modesty to the side, know who you are. Stop that.
That's actually not true.
Is it not true, or do you disagree with me? And I will accept either.
Well, say you spent some time with Martin Scorsese.
Which you did.
You get to know Martin Scorsese. He's from a certain background in Little Italy in New York City, like the 1950s. He was asthmatic. He was not, his respiratory system wasn't so good. He couldn't run out and play and go kill people and beat up people the way the other kids were doing. So Martin Scorsese became like an observer. And many people who are great film directors are looking at life as observers. So they're on the sidelines, and the same with John Updike. Now, I did not know Hemingway, but Hemingway was more of a person who was active in life. He was a captain of the football team in high school. He went on, he was in the, he volunteered to serve in the war when he was about 18 years old. He did things that were more active. And so he is not necessarily just the person who's on the sidelines. But most writers, artists, and painters are people who are looking and thinking and, listening to other people.
Okay. So I want to ask you about Carolina Bush and Frederick Oates, who you refer to quite frequently here. But you talk about them coming and going, but not as much about kind of the quiet time or the private time you spend with them. Is that intentional, or is there something you could share, like with you and your mother, for instance, the relationship you had that may have shaped you in some way that is important?
Well, I was very, very close to my parents, and I was very lucky to have my parents for quite a long time. They were both about 85 when they passed away, so that was, that was a long life, especially for that generation. It wasn't really known that you were supposed to eat carefully. That was a generation that smoked. They both smoked. They both quit school when they were in 8th grade to go to work because the family was very poor. Both their families were quite poor. And I just found that they were wonderful models. I wasn't thinking that they were models when I was growing up, but they actually were. They never complained about anything. We're living now in a world in which people will confess all sorts of embarrassing things to one another, on social media, or they complain, or they're victims, or they're whining about something. But this generation never really blamed other people for their problems. Like if something was going wrong, they would try to remedy it, but they wouldn't try to say it's somebody else's fault. So I sort of grew up with that. Also, working class, you're working. And so to me, life is centered around work, and work is to be respected. I'm not looking forward to a vacation or retiring, because to me, work is a very beautiful thing.
They seem to make it a point to be on schedule with you, to see their baby do her thing when you had a play coming out, or working on something.
They read all my books. I gave them all my books. Staggering. I didn't give them all the books at once, but one by one. And my mother was not an intellectual person, but she would read the novels very carefully. My father was much more like, he could have been an intellectual. If circumstances had dealt cards to him that were different, he might have been a university professor. And he took courses as a senior citizen. So he read my books, and he was taking courses like American literature at the University of Buffalo. And that was his happy time. He retired, then had 20 years to go adult education. That's something that's good to give money to. I've done some of that, because adult education is just so precious and sometimes gets overlooked.
Well, I want to congratulate you on this. I really enjoyed this as well, on this meaning Joyce Oates' letter to a biographer, which is really fun because she lets loose and she acts out a little bit in there. That's kind of fun because she reads people a little bit, and I'm sure you knew it was coming out in the book, so you didn't care about what they felt about that, right?
Well, I didn't ever know that anybody'd see these letters.
Even when you put it in a book and put it in the bookstore?
No, well, Greg did that.
Oh, Greg. That's why you want to be undercover?
Well, I would never have done this myself. I wouldn't even have thought of it. It's like I would never have thought of it at all.
And 25th anniversary, this is being re-released again.
Yeah.
And what do you got to say about that?
Well, that's my Valentine to adolescence. And when I read that now, it was such another era. There was not even a glimmer of an idea of a thought of anything like a school shooting. Absolutely not. The whole concept, no. They're just high school kids, no online, no cell phones, no TikTok, no cyberbullying. They were just they seemed so innocent. And a lot of emphasis on sports and then girls being friends, but it just was such a different era. So when I read that now, and then I read an article like in the New Yorker about the suicide rate spiking with adolescents and teenagers, I just think, what a different world it is now than it was Brocart Blues. It's sort of like my love letter to adolescence.
Well, they're giving me the hook here when you see them coming like that. So I've got some other stuff we could talk about, but maybe because I'm going to tell people that you and I are like the closest of friends and that we take family holidays together now and stuff. B-Room, you hear all kind of things about me and you out there in the world. But I'm just beside myself with gratitude to spend this evening with you and to get to know you right here as a living being.
Thank you.
I'm grateful. I'm grateful to you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Joyce Carol Oates. You did a beautiful job. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is this working? Yes? Thank you both so much. thank you for putting up with our sound glitches in the beginning, but it turned out perfectly, Joyce. We could hear you perfectly, so our apologies for the beginning. This was wonderful. Joyce, we are so grateful to you for coming down for this. Joe. Joe, you are a wonderful moderator. Thank you. So much of this resonated. We talked earlier, Joyce, about the format, and I feel like I know you as a person now just from this hour with you. Thank you. I'm going to bring Joe Davich up from the Georgia Center for the Book. He's going to tell us about the book signing and all the rules that go along with that. He's the expert. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Because I work in a library, I'm good at rules. So everyone just go ahead and sit. You're going to make book friends tonight. So your books have already been signed if you've purchased them this evening. So you can get 5 books signed to start. Then you have to go to the back of the line. You can get a total of 10 tonight, okay? Now, what we're going to do is we're going to start up here, and we're going to do the first 2 rows so we can kind of set a pace for this evening. If there are people with mobility issues, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a little grace this evening to those individuals. So the first 2 rows, if you need anything signed, please come up.